that subscribe button, give this video a like, because YouTube's algorithm doesn't love dark history. And I need your help making sure these stories actually reach people. Now get comfortable, dim the lights, and prepare to learn 101 things your government did that they really hoped you'd never find out about. Let's start in 1932 in a place called Macon County, Alabama. The Tuskegee Syphilis Study. It's 1932. The Great Depression is crushing America, and in Macon County, Alabama, the U.S. Public Health Service approaches nearly 400 black men. They tell them they're receiving free health care for bad blood. Generous, right? Except here's the thing. These men had syphilis, and the government knew it. For 40 years, doctors watched these men suffer. They documented the progression of untreated syphilis as it destroyed their bodies, their minds, their lives. Even after penicillin became the standard cure in 1947, they withheld it. They didn't tell the men what they actually had. They just... And speaking of experiments people didn't consent to, the Intelligence Agency and their relationship with lysergic acid diethylamide, or as your cool uncle calls it, LSD. From 1953 to 1973, the CIA ran a program called MK Ultra. The goal? Mind control. The method? Drugging thousands of Americans without their knowledge or consent. We're talking prisoners, mental patients, random citizens at bars. The CIA literally funded a brothel operation in San Francisco where they dosed Johns with LSD through one-way mirrors, for science. They gave it to soldiers, to hospital patients, to university students who thought they were participating in normal studies. One CIA officer even spiked his colleague's coffee with LSD. That guy later died by jumping through a window. Oops. The craziest part? We only know about this because someone forgot to shred the files. Most of the records were destroyed on purpose in 1973. So, if you've ever felt paranoid, just remember, sometimes the paranoia is justified. Speaking of justified paranoia, military leaders have actually pitched staging terrorist attacks. Operation Northwoods, it's 1962. Cuba is right there, just 90 miles from Florida, and the Joint Chiefs of Staff are getting creative. By creative, I mean they unanimously approved a plan to stage false flag terrorist attacks on American soil to justify invading Cuba. The proposal included hijacking planes, bombing U.S. cities, sinking boats full of Cuban refugees, and blaming it all on Castro. They wanted to create a helpful wave of national indignation. Their words, not mine. They even suggested painting a plane to look like a civilian aircraft, filling it with fake passengers, and shooting it down. Just normal Pentagon stuff. President Kennedy read the proposal. Then he said no, firmly. The kind of no that ends careers. The operation never happened, but the document sat in a vault until it was declassified in 1997. You can read it yourself. It's real. Now, if you think that's the only time the government got creative with surveillance and disruption tactics, buckle up, because the FBI had a whole program for that. COINTELPRO, from 1956 to 1971, the FBI ran a delightful program called COINTELPRO, short for Counterintelligence Program. Their mission? Surveilling, infiltrating, discrediting, and disrupting American citizens who had opinions the government didn't like. Civil rights activists, anti-war protesters, the Black Panthers. Even Albert Einstein had a file. But the FBI's special project was Martin Luther King Jr. They wiretapped his home, his hotel rooms, his phones. They recorded his private conversations, looking for anything to destroy his reputation. Then they sent him a letter, an anonymous letter suggesting he kill himself before accepting the Nobel Peace Prize. They included audio recordings from their surveillance, implying they'd release them if he didn't comply. This wasn't a rogue agent. This was official policy. J. Edgar Hoover personally approved operations to expose, disrupt, misdirect, discredit, or otherwise neutralize activists. They didn't just watch people, they actively tried to destroy their lives, relationships, and organizations. But surveillance wasn't the only creative solution the government found to problems. Sometimes they just added poison to things people were already drinking. Poisoned alcohol during Prohibition. Let's rewind to the 1920s. Prohibition is in full swing, and Americans are still drinking. Because of course they are. The government's frustrated, so they decide to try a new tactic, poisoning the alcohol supply. Industrial alcohol was regularly stolen and redistilled into bootleg liquor. The government knew this, so they ordered manufacturers to add even more toxic chemicals, things like methanol, gasoline, benzene, and acetone. The idea was to make people too sick to drink. The reality? They made people dead. By the end of Prohibition in 1933, an estimated 10,000 Americans had died from government-poisoned alcohol. On Christmas Eve 1926 alone, 60 people died in New York City from toxic booze. The government kept doing it anyway. Medical examiners called it murder. The government called it deterrence. Either way, people kept drinking and kept dying, because apparently the best way to handle a public health issue is to add more poison. And speaking of adding things to people without asking, let's talk about what they did to pregnant women. Radiation experiments on pregnant women. It's the 1940s and 50s, and scientists are very curious about radiation. So curious, in fact, that they decide to feed radioactive iron to hundreds of pregnant women at Vanderbilt University and other institutions. The women were told they were receiving vitamin supplements to help their babies. They were not informed that these vitamins were radioactive isotopes. The goal was to study how radiation moved through the body and into the fetus, for science. And by science, I mean we want to know what happens during nuclear fallout. So let's use pregnant women as test subjects. The study tracked these women and their children for years. Some of the children developed cancer. The government didn't tell the families about the radiation until decades later. When the story finally broke in the 1990s, settlements were paid,